Imagine trying to learn, like, a highly complex hip-hop dance routine, right? But the instructional video is just blasting at double speed.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like pure chaos.
Right. The music is blaring, the dancer is just this total blur of motion, and within maybe 10 seconds, feet are tangled, balance is totally lost.
And the brain just completely shuts down.
Exactly. Just in sheer frustration.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody would ever expect to master a physical skill that way.
No, of course not.
Yet that is exactly the psychological gauntlet people throw themselves into every single day when they try to acquire a new language.
It really is.
They dive straight into native level material, get instantly overwhelmed by the sheer velocity of it all, and then, well, they just assume they don't have the talent for it.
Which is a phenomenal setup for failure, honestly. And, it's entirely avoidable. That's actually the core of what we are analyzing in today's deep dive.
Yeah, we have a really fantastic source text today.
We do. We are looking at this really revealing conversational script featuring two language learners. On one side, we have Jetro, who perfectly represents that highly motivated but immensely frustrated student.
We've all been Jetro at some point.
Right. He is putting in the effort but just hitting constant walls. And then on the other side, we have Leo, an experienced learner who has essentially cracked the code on how to make language acquisition not just sustainable, but actually frictionless.
Frictionless is the perfect word for it, because the mission of this deep dive is to extract Leo's practical advice on how to effectively learn a language, specifically English in this context, through things like podcasts, singing songs, writing short daily journals, and just building a foundation of consistent study.
And what's really compelling isn't just the what of Leo's advice, but the how and the why behind it.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this, because the immediate panic-inducing barrier Jetro brings up right at the start of their coffee shop chat is something everyone recognizes.
Oh, the speed of native speakers.
Exactly. Jetro complains that the words just become this unbroken, rapid-fire stream of noise.
Which is a remarkably accurate description of what the auditory cortex is actually experiencing in that moment.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. When a learner looks at a printed sentence in a textbook, there is a clear, comforting white space between every single word.
Right, the boundaries are obvious.
Exactly. The brain can process them as individual, discrete units of data. But spoken language, especially fluent English, just does not contain those convenient white spaces.
It's all just mashed together.
Yeah, and in the text, Leo introduces Jetro to this concept of connected speech.
Right, because native speakers aren't robotic. They don't enunciate every single syllable in isolation.
Not at all. They link words together, they completely drop certain consonant sounds, they alter vowels.
Like, I think about a phrase like, "Did you eat yet?"
That's a perfect example.
In connected rapid speech, that often morphs into something that sounds like "Jeet yet."
Right. Jeet yet. And for a brain that has only studied the textbook pronunciation of those 4 separate words, Jeet yet is completely unrecognizable.
The acoustic signal just doesn't match the mental dictionary at all.
Which triggers an immediate stress response. The listener is still trying to translate the first 2 words, but the speaker is already a whole sentence ahead.
And the whole system just crashes.
Exactly. But Leo offers a remarkably simple mechanical fix for this in the script.
Yeah, he tells Jetro to take English podcasts or audiobooks and just physically slow them down to 0.75x speed.
It's such a practical tip.
And then, only once the ear is comfortable, slowly dial it back up to normal speed.
What's fascinating here is that it's a brilliant technological solution to a biological bottleneck.
But wait, I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Doesn't slowing down audio digitally make everyone sound, I don't know, slightly distorted? Like the vowels get all stretched out and the cadence feels sluggish.
I get that.
How does artificially warping the language actually help someone learn natural pronunciation? Wouldn't it just teach the brain bad habits?
That is a very valid concern. And historically, with old analog tape recorders, slowing things down did distort the pitch.
Right. Everyone sounded deeply intoxicated.
Exactly. But modern digital audio algorithms actually preserve the natural pitch while simply stretching the duration of the sound waves.
Oh, so the voice sounds normal, just slower.
Precisely. And the cognitive benefit of this is massive. By mechanically dropping the speed to 0.75x, the learner is artificially creating micropauses within that connected speech.
So it's essentially inserting those comforting white spaces back into the audio.
Yes, exactly. It gives the brain's language comprehension center, which is Wernicke's area, the critical processing milliseconds it needs to actually identify the boundaries between words.
That makes so much sense. It lowers the data rate to something the neural pathways can actually handle without triggering that panic response.
Right. The brain is no longer in a state of high alert, desperately trying to keep up. It can relax, listen to how did and you blend together in slow motion, and begin to map those complex sounds to the vocabulary it already knows.
It is exactly like the hip-hop routine analogy we started with.
Completely.
Slowing the music down so the brain can understand the mechanics of the movement, like where the foot goes, how the hip turns, before ever attempting it at full tempo.
And once that acoustic mapping happens at 0.75x speed, the neural pathways strengthen. The brain becomes much more efficient at recognizing those blended sounds.
So the learner can incrementally bump the speed to 0.8x,
Hmm?
then 0.9x, and eventually 1.0x completely without the panic.
Exactly. It's a stepping stone.
Okay, so that completely changes the game for auditory processing. But taking information in is really only half the battle.
Unfortunately.
Comprehension doesn't automatically equal output. The real freeze happens when the vocal cords and the motor functions of the mouth have to actually catch up to the ears.
Which brings up Jetro's next hurdle in the conversation.
Right. He wants to improve his spoken rhythm and pronunciation, but doing endless, tedious vocal drills in front of a mirror just sounds absolutely miserable.
And this is where Leo suggests something that sounds almost too recreational to be considered studying.
I love this part.
He tells Jetro to pull up song lyrics online, put on the music, and simply sing along.
Just karaoke, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Leo points out that this naturally improves pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation, all without feeling like a formal grammar or speaking lesson.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I want to dig into the psychological sleight of hand happening here.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Because singing along to a pop song does not feel like studying.
Yeah.
But there's a massive cognitive bypass occurring.
How do you mean?
Well, when someone is speaking a foreign language in a conversational setting, they are usually hyper-aware of the fact that they're speaking a foreign language.
Oh, absolutely. The self-consciousness is huge.
Right. The brain's internal critic is turned up to maximum volume. The learner is analyzing their grammar in real time. They are terrified of mispronouncing a difficult vowel. They are sweating over their accent.
The cognitive load is entirely focused on the fear of making an error.
Exactly. But music acts as a Trojan horse.
I like that analogy.
By focusing on matching a singer's melody and desperately trying to keep up with the driving beat of a song, the learner is totally distracted from that anxiety.
They're just trying to hit the notes.
Yes. The conscious, critical part of the brain is so busy just following the rhythm that the subconscious motor functions just take over the physical act of forming the words. The fear response is completely bypassed.
It is a brilliant way to disarm the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center.
The amygdala just goes to sleep.
Pretty much. When that internal critic is silenced by the music, the vocal cords can actually relax. But beyond just lowering anxiety, music solves one of the hardest mechanical problems in English, which is rhythm.
Right. English has a very specific rhythm to it,
It does. English is what linguists call a stress-timed language.
meaning the timing is based on the stressed syllables, rather than every single syllable getting equal weight, like in some other languages.
Right. Some words are stretched out and others are just squished together to fit the beat of the sentence.
Which can be really unintuitive for a learner.
Highly unintuitive. When reading aloud from a textbook, a learner might pause in completely unnatural places or emphasize the wrong syllables because they are processing the text rigidly, just word by word.
But a song forces the learner to adopt the natural cadence of the language.
Exactly. The strict timing of the music dictates exactly where the stress falls. The melody dictates the rising and falling intonation.
So instead of trying to memorize a complex, dry set of pronunciation rules from some phonetic chart, the learner is literally feeling the rhythm of the language in their physical body.
Right. The brain thinks it is just enjoying a catchy tune, but the vocal tract is actually undergoing rigorous, perfectly timed phonetic training.
It's genius. It really highlights a recurring theme in Leo's philosophy, which is that the most effective learning happens when it doesn't actually feel like studying at all.
Which is a beautiful philosophy until the learner comes face to face with the most notoriously stressful part of language acquisition.
Ah, yes. The blank page.
The dreaded blank page.
We've covered passive audio input with the 0.75x speed trick and active verbal practice through singing. But written output is a totally different beast.
It really is.
Jetro voices a fear that is universally understood by anyone who has ever tried to learn a new skill. He says his vocabulary is simply too small to write good essays or draft long messages.
He feels completely inadequate before he even picks up a pen.
It's the fear of not having enough tools in the toolbox to build the house.
Oh.
So the instinct is to just avoid building anything at all until the toolbox is perfectly full.
Which, of course, it never will be.
Right. But Leo's solution is so beautifully counterintuitive. He tells Jetro to abandon the concept of the essay entirely. Just throw it out the window.
Oh, essays.
None. Instead, he suggests a microjournaling habit. The rule is incredibly rigid but very small.
What is it?
Every night, right before going to sleep, write exactly 3 sentences in English about the day. No more, no less. Just 3 sentences.
Well, that is small.
The example Leo gives Jetro in the script is almost shockingly basic. It goes, "Today I drank coffee with Leo. We talked about English. I felt happy."
That is entirely stripped of complexity, just a subject, a verb, and an object.
Yeah, and Leo's theory is that over time, as vocabulary naturally grows, those sentences will organically become longer and more descriptive.
This raises an important question, though.
It's that.
Well, I have to push back a little just to test the validity of this, because looking at that example, I drank coffee, we talked, I felt happy. That takes maybe 45 seconds to write.
Barely a minute, yeah.
Is writing 3 ultra-simple kindergarten-level sentences a day really going to do anything?
Yeah.
It just seems too small to move the needle on actual fluency.
That skepticism is entirely natural. And if we were only looking at this from a purely grammatical standpoint, you would be totally right.
Writing I drank coffee doesn't exactly teach advanced syntax.
No, it doesn't. But the underlying brilliance of the 3-sentence rule is rooted deeply in behavioral psychology, specifically regarding task initiation and cognitive load.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, when someone sits down with the goal of, writing an essay in a foreign language, the cognitive load is massive.
Because they have to think about everything all at once.
Exactly. The brain has to juggle structure, a thesis, transitions, vocabulary retrieval, and grammar checking concurrently.
For a beginner, that massive load triggers a huge stress response.
Right. The brain perceives the task as a literal threat to its energy reserves. In physics, there is a concept called activation energy, which is a minimum amount of energy required to start a chemical reaction.
And that applies to psychology as well.
Yes. The activation energy required to start an essay is enormous.
So people just procrastinate instead.
Exactly. They scroll on their phones because that requires 0 activation energy. But the 3-sentence rule hacks this entire system.
By lowering the activation energy.
By lowering it to near 0. Anyone, regardless of how exhausted they are at the end of a long day, can string together 3 basic sentences.
It completely bypasses the brain's resistance mechanism.
It utterly destroys the intimidation factor. It eliminates that very common excuse of, "I don't have enough time," or "I'm just too tired to study today."
Precisely. And more importantly, it proves something vital to the learner's subconscious.
What does it prove?
By forcing the output, even at that absolute basic level, it proves that they already possess enough vocabulary to start expressing their lived experience right now, today.
They don't have to wait until they reach some mythical, faraway level of advanced fluency to begin communicating.
It is a fundamental identity shift. It takes the learner from someone who is trying to learn English someday to someone who actively writes in English every single day.
Oh, that's powerful.
Yes. That daily repetition, that daily proof of competence, builds a profound sense of self-efficacy. And the linguistic progression basically takes care of itself.
Because you just naturally want to do more.
Exactly. Once the habit of sitting down and writing 3 sentences is locked in, the brain naturally gets bored of just writing, "I drank coffee."
Right. It wants a challenge.
After a month, it will naturally want to write, "I drank a bitter dark roast coffee at the corner cafe." The vocabulary layers itself onto the habit, but the habit absolutely has to come first.
Which perfectly reveals the overarching theme of Leo's entire philosophy. The brilliance of the nightly 3-sentence journal isn't just about practicing writing. It is a masterclass in the sheer power of small daily habits.
It is about consistency over intensity.
So what does this all mean? Well, it's the core thesis of their entire conversation. Jetro has this light bulb moment in the text where he realizes the secret really is just starting small.
And Leo confirms it, dropping what is arguably the most critical piece of advice in the whole script. He lays out the fundamental math of fluency.
Right. Leo states unequivocally that it is much better to study for 15 minutes every single day than to cram for 5 hours only on Sundays.
Consistency is what actually builds real fluency.
And this revelation makes Jetro so excited that he commits to starting his 3-sentence journal that very night.
And that math, 15 minutes daily versus 5 hours weekly, is deeply supported by neuroscience.
Let's explore that, because intuitively, society tells us that hard work and massive effort yield massive results.
Muscle culture, basically.
Exactly. But think about watering a houseplant. If someone completely ignores a potted plant all week long, and then on Sunday they feel guilty and decide to pour a massive, heavy bucket of water entirely over it, the plant doesn't suddenly absorb a week's worth of hydration.
No, the soil floods, the water just runs off the sides, and the roots likely rot.
Right. The plant gets stressed and completely fails to thrive.
But if that same person gives the plant just a small sprinkle of water every single day, the soil stays consistently moist.
The roots actually have the time to absorb the nutrients steadily, and the plant grows beautifully.
Binge studying for 5 hours on a Sunday is the massive bucket of water.
The brain just gets flooded.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that analogy maps perfectly onto the concept of neuroplasticity and memory consolidation.
The brain works very much like that soil.
It does. When a learner attempts to cram 5 hours of complex vocabulary and grammar rules in one exhausting caffeine-fueled weekend session, the brain reaches cognitive overload very quickly.
It just can't take any more in.
Right. The hippocampus, which is responsible for forming new memories, simply cannot encode that much novel information all at once.
So a vast majority of that 5-hour effort just runs off like the water.
It is completely lost by Tuesday. The brain hasn't had the repeated spaced exposure necessary to signal that the information is actually important enough to convert from short-term to long-term memory.
But daily, 15-minute interactions fundamentally change that signaling process.
Because you are touching the language constantly.
Exactly. By engaging with the language every single day, whether it is listening to a podcast at 0.75x speed on a commute, singing a pop song while cooking dinner, or writing 3 basic sentences right before bed, the brain is kept in a continuous state of engagement.
It sends a repetitive signal to the nervous system.
Like, I encounter this information every single day, therefore this information must be vital for my daily survival.
And the brain prioritizes survival information above all else.
Precisely. That is what drastically increases retention. And there's an added behavioral benefit, too.
Which is?
Massive 5-hour Sunday cram sessions turn language learning into a dreaded, exhausting chore. It becomes this massive obligation looming over the entire weekend.
It requires huge activation energy, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. But 15 minutes. That is just a minor part of the daily routine.
Yeah.
It is entirely frictionless.
It removes the dread.
It really does. And that is exactly what this deep dive into Leo and Jetro's conversation has really highlighted. The secret to mastering something as complex as English isn't found in sheer willpower or grueling marathon study sessions.
No, it's in the small adjustments.
We started by looking at the auditory overload of native speakers and found that simply utilizing the 0.75x speed setting on a podcast allows the brain the processing time to actually hear the microspaces in connected speech.
Then we saw how utilizing song lyrics acts as a psychological bypass.
Distracting the brain.
Right. It occupies the conscious mind's internal critic, allowing the vocal motor functions to naturally absorb rhythm and intonation without the paralyzing anxiety of formal speaking drills.
We also unpacked the brilliance of conquering the blank page through the 3-sentence daily journal, a method that completely circumvents the brain's stress response to heavy cognitive loads.
Proving to the learner that they already have the tools to communicate their daily lived experience today.
And ultimately, it all rests on the foundational math of fluency, trusting that the neuroplasticity generated by 15 minutes of daily consistency will always outperform the exhausting runoff of 5 hours of weekend cramming.
The daily sprinkle of water versus the Sunday flood.
It really is a comprehensive framework for sustainable learning. And what makes this so incredibly powerful is that these mechanics aren't just limited to English or language acquisition.
That's very true.
The underlying principles we've discussed today are a masterclass in how to approach any overwhelming, seemingly impossible skill.
Whether someone is trying to learn complex programming languages, picking up a new musical instrument, or, I don't know, trying to understand dense financial markets.
Exactly. It is all about removing the friction. It is about intentionally lowering the barrier to entry so drastically that starting is virtually effortless.
And then simply trusting the absolute magic of the compound interest of small daily habits.
It is a profound reminder that consistency, paired with strategic mechanical adjustments, will always beat brute force intensity when it comes to long-term growth and mastery.
Always.
So, as we wrap up this exploration, there's one final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We started by looking at how overwhelming it is to try and learn a massive skill at full speed, like that double-speed hip-hop routine.
Right.
But today we saw that just lowering the speed of an audiobook, a tiny fraction, or strictly limiting a daunting writing task to just 3 simple sentences can completely dismantle those massive barriers.
It fundamentally changes the brain's relationship with the challenge itself.
It begs the question if these tiny artificial adjustments in speed and size can solve such a massive linguistic barrier. What other massive, intimidating challenges in life, the ones we've been putting off because they seem too huge, could be conquered simply by artificially slowing down the pace or drastically shrinking the daily requirement?